to abandon. Chapter 1, The House on the Hill. In the kingdom of Valoria, there was a small village called Oakridge. It wasn't rich. It wasn't famous. It wasn't important enough to appear on most maps. Yet everyone in the surrounding region knew one name: the Ashbourne family. For generations, the Ashbournes had been the pride of Oakridge. At the center of that reputation stood one man, the family patriarch, Theodore Ashbourne. Even in his old age, Theodore looked more like a warrior than a farmer. His broad shoulders had carried timber during storms. His hands had rebuilt homes after floods. His presence alone was enough to silence arguments. Children admired him. Adults respected him. And even travelers passing through Oakridge had heard stories about the man. The villagers often said, "If Theodore asks for help, the entire village will answer." That was the level of respect he commanded. And Theodore had 5 sons. The eldest was a high-ranking government official in the capital. The second managed one of the largest engineering firms in the kingdom. The third served in law enforcement. The fourth worked for the national treasury. Every son had become successful. Every son had built a name for himself. Every son, except the youngest, Darren Ashbourne. Unlike his brothers, Darren had never achieved anything remarkable. He wasn't foolish. He wasn't lazy. But he lacked the brilliance that seemed to come naturally to the rest of the family. Whenever relatives gathered, comparisons followed. Your brother just received another promotion. The third brother bought a new house. The fourth brother's daughter entered an elite academy. Every conversation somehow became a reminder of Darren's shortcomings. Over time, he learned to smile and stay quiet. After all, arguing wouldn't change anything. As the years passed, the brothers married and moved away. One settled in the capital. Another moved near the coast. Another relocated to a growing industrial city. One by one, they left Oakridge behind. But somebody still needed to maintain the ancestral home. Somebody still needed to stay with Theodore and his wife. Without discussion. Without debate. The responsibility naturally fell upon Darren. The least successful son. The least respected son. The son nobody expected much from. Ironically, the person considered the weakest was the one left carrying the family's roots. Life continued. Days became months. Months became years. Then one winter evening, the Ashbourne estate became livelier than it had been in decades. Darren's wife gave birth to a son. The moment Theodore heard the news, he rushed into the room despite his age. When he finally held the child in his arms, the old patriarch laughed. A loud, genuine laugh. The kind that came from deep within the heart. A grandson. My grandson. The villagers soon arrived with gifts and congratulations. The house became filled with voices. Laughter echoed through the halls. For the first time in years, Theodore looked happier than ever. He proudly carried the child around the estate, showing him to anyone willing to look. The old man even insisted on introducing the baby to half the village. The child was eventually given a name. Ethan Ashbourne, the newest member of the family, the youngest grandson of the Ashbourne lineage. As the celebrations continued, Theodore looked down at the sleeping baby. The tiny child grabbed his finger. The old man's eyes softened. Grow strong. Grow wise. And live a life with no regrets. Nobody paid much attention to those words. They sounded like the ordinary blessing of a grandfather. Yet somewhere beyond sight, beyond understanding, someone listened carefully. Someone who knew exactly how much regret could destroy a life. The baby slept peacefully, unaware of the expectations waiting ahead, unaware of the struggles his family would face, and completely unaware that his life had already attracted the attention of something impossible. Something that had been waiting a very long time for this moment. The first page of Ethan Ashbourne's story had finally begun. Chapter End. Chapter 2, The Voice. 4 years later, the Ashbourne estate sat quietly atop the hill overlooking Oakridge. The morning sun had barely risen. Most villagers were still asleep. A small figure, however, was already awake. Or rather, trying very hard not to be. 4-year-old Ethan Ashbourne buried himself deeper beneath his blanket. The room was warm, comfortable, perfect. Then a voice suddenly echoed inside his head. Wake up, Dot. Ethan's eyes shot open. He immediately sat upright. His tiny heart pounded. The room was empty. No one was there. He looked under the bed, inside the closet, behind the curtains. Nothing. The voice had vanished. After several minutes, Ethan convinced himself that he had imagined it. Relieved, he lay back down. Then, wake up, Dot. The voice returned. Cold. Emotionless. Unfamiliar. Ethan froze. His eyes widened. A moment later, he began crying. Loudly. Very loudly. Within seconds, his mother rushed into the room. Ethan. She quickly picked him up. What happened? The little boy pointed around the room. Someone's talking. His mother looked confused. What do you mean? The voice? What voice? Ethan looked around. The voice had disappeared again. His mother spent the next 10 minutes comforting him. Eventually, she assumed he had simply experienced a nightmare. Children imagine strange things all the time. Nothing unusual. After calming down, Ethan followed her downstairs for breakfast. Everything seemed normal again. Until the voice returned. Brush your teeth. Ethan nearly dropped his spoon. His mother glanced at him. Is something wrong? Ethan shook his head. The voice continued. Brush your teeth. No. The word slipped from his mouth before he realized it. His mother blinked. What? Anything. The voice remained silent for several seconds. Then, task assigned. Brush teeth within 3 minutes. Failure will result in punishment. Ethan stared blankly. Punishment? What punishment? He was only 4 years old. How could a voice punish him? Gathering every ounce of courage he possessed, Ethan ignored it. He finished breakfast, walked outside, and completely forgot about brushing his teeth. For exactly 23 seconds. Then pain exploded across his forehead. OW. Ethan collapsed onto the grass. The sensation wasn't enough to injure him. But it hurt. A lot. Like being flicked by an invisible giant. Tears immediately filled his eyes. The voice spoke again. Task failed. Punishment delivered. Ethan cried. For the second time that morning. From a distance, Theodore Ashbourne looked over. What happened now? His mother sighed. I have no idea. Neither of them knew. Because neither of them could hear the voice. Only Ethan could. That evening, Ethan sat alone in his room. Suspicious. Angry. Terrified. He glared at the ceiling. Who are you? Silence. Are you a ghost? Silence. Monster. Silence. Bandit. Silence. Ethan frowned. Then the voice finally answered. Wake up tomorrow at sunrise. That wasn't an answer. That was another order. The little boy clenched his fists. I won't. Silence. For several moments, nothing happened. Then, you will. Ethan's eye twitched. At that moment, a fierce rivalry was born. One side was a stubborn 4-year-old. The other was a mysterious voice that refused to explain itself. Neither of them knew it yet. But this battle would continue for years. And before it finally ended, one of them would save the other's life. Chapter End. Chapter 3, The First Battle. Ethan Ashbourne had reached a conclusion. The voice was evil. There was no other explanation. Normal people did not invade children's heads. Normal people did not threaten punishment over toothbrushes. And normal people certainly did not wake children up before sunrise. Unfortunately, the voice did not care about Ethan's opinion. The next morning, wake up. Ethan buried himself deeper under his blanket. No. Wake up. No. Wake up. No. For nearly a minute, neither side backed down. Then, punishment in 10 seconds. Ethan froze. You're bluffing. 9. Definitely bluffing. 8. Ethan became less confident. 7. A little sweat appeared on his forehead. 6. Maybe. 5. The memory of yesterday's pain resurfaced. 4. His confidence vanished. 3. Ethan threw the blanket aside. I'm awake. The countdown stopped. Silence filled the room. For a brief moment, Ethan felt victorious. Then, good God. The voice sounded annoyingly satisfied. Ethan wanted to scream. Instead, he climbed out of bed. His mother nearly dropped the breakfast plate when she saw him. Ethan. The little boy was awake before sunrise. Voluntarily. This had never happened before. Are you feeling sick? Ethan looked away. No. His mother touched his forehead. No fever. Strange. Very strange. The voice spoke again. Brush teeth. This time Ethan obeyed immediately. The memory of punishment remained fresh. A few minutes later. Task complete. Well done. Ethan blinked. That was new. The voice had complimented him. Sort of. The praise felt cold and mechanical. But it still felt surprisingly nice. Ethan quickly shook his head. No. He wasn't falling for that. The voice was clearly trying to manipulate him. Definitely. Probably. Maybe. The day continued normally. Until afternoon. Ethan was playing outside near the estate when the voice returned. New task assigned. The little boy immediately became alert. Oh no. Run to the old oak tree and back. Ethan stared at the message. The giant oak tree stood almost half a kilometer away. Why? Task assigned. That's not an answer. Complete within 10 minutes. Ethan crossed his arms. No. Silence. The voice didn't argue. Didn't threaten. Didn't negotiate. Which somehow felt even scarier. 5 minutes passed. Then 6. Then 7. The closer the deadline came, the more nervous Ethan became. Finally. 5. He started running. His tiny legs pumped furiously. Halfway there, he was already exhausted. By the time he reached the oak tree, he wanted to collapse. But the deadline remained. So he turned around and ran back. When he finally reached the estate, he fell onto the grass. Panting, sweating, completely exhausted. The voice responded immediately. Task complete. Physical endurance plus 0.01%. Ethan blinked. What? The message vanished. He sat upright. What does that mean? No response. What is physical endurance? Silence. What does 0.01% do? Nothing. The voice had once again decided communication was optional. Ethan gritted his teeth. I hate you. For several seconds, there was only silence. Then, acknowledged. Ethan nearly exploded. That evening, Theodore Ashbourne found his grandson practicing short sprints around the courtyard. The old man raised an eyebrow. Ethan? The boy froze. Yes, grandfather. What are you doing? Ethan hesitated. He couldn't exactly explain the truth. So he pointed at the sky. Training. Theodore stared. Then laughed so hard he almost dropped his walking stick. Training? Ethan nodded seriously. The old patriarch laughed even harder. Most people would have found the scene adorable. Only Ethan knew the truth. He wasn't training because he wanted to. He was training because a tyrant lived inside his head. That night, after everyone went to sleep, Ethan lay in bed staring at the ceiling. For the first time, however, he wasn't scared. He was curious. The voice had punished him. But it had also helped him. It forced him to wake up early. Forced him to brush his teeth. Forced him to exercise. The methods were terrible. Absolutely terrible. But the results seemed real. After several minutes of thinking, Ethan quietly asked, "Why are you doing this?" Silence. Just as he expected. Then, unexpectedly, to prevent regret. Ethan sat upright. It was the first real answer the voice had ever given. Unfortunately, it raised far more questions than it answered. Chapter End. Chapter 4, The Cruel Teacher. Ethan stared at the ceiling. Sleep refused to come. The voice's words kept repeating in his mind. To prevent regret. What regret? He was only 4 years old. The biggest regret in his life so far was dropping a sweet into a puddle. What kind of regret could possibly require invisible punishments? The more he thought about it, the less sense it made. Eventually, exhaustion won. He drifted to sleep, only to be awakened once again. Wake up. Ethan's eye twitched. 3 days. The voice had been tormenting him for 3 whole days. And somehow it was becoming worse. Not better. Worse. Because now the tasks were multiplying. Brush teeth. Make bed. Run to the oak tree. Read for 10 minutes. Ethan sat on his bed, expressionless. At some point, even anger became tiring. His mother glanced at him during breakfast. Ethan, you've been acting strange lately. The little boy nearly choked. Had she discovered the voice? Could adults hear it now? His mother smiled. You've become more responsible. Ethan blinked. Responsible? He looked down at himself. The bed had been made. His teeth were brushed. His clothes were neat. Even Theodore had praised him yesterday. The realization made him feel uneasy. The voice was winning. And he hated it. That afternoon, Theodore called him into the courtyard. The old patriarch sat beneath the shade of a large tree. Ethan? Yes, grandfather? The old man pointed toward a pile of firewood. Help me sort these. Ethan obediently began moving the smaller pieces. Theodore watched quietly. After several minutes, he spoke. You've changed. Ethan froze. Had grandfather noticed too? You've become more disciplined. The old man smiled. That's a good thing. Ethan didn't know how to respond. Because technically, he wasn't disciplined. He was terrified. There was a difference. That evening, the system assigned another task. Read for 15 minutes. Ethan frowned. Reading was boring. Especially because he had already learned most of the children's books in the estate. Still, punishment was worse. So he obeyed. One book became 2. Then 3. As the days passed, something unexpected happened. He began enjoying it. Stories. Adventures. History. Knowledge. There were entire worlds hidden inside books. Worlds he had never imagined before. One afternoon he became so absorbed in reading that he forgot the system entirely. Until task complete. Ethan nearly threw the book across the room. Can you stop appearing like that? Silence. Seriously. Nothing. You're annoying. No response. Ethan sighed. Talking to the system was like arguing with a wall. A wall that occasionally punched you. Weeks passed. Then months. The strange routine became normal. Normal. Wake up. Up. Brush teeth. Exercise. Read. Learn. Sleep. Repeat. Ethan still hated the voice. But something strange was happening. The punishments were becoming less frequent. Not because the system had become kinder, but because Ethan was completing more tasks. Without realizing it, he was changing. Little by little. Day by day. Habit by habit. One evening, while the family gathered for dinner, Theodore suddenly laughed. You know what's funny? Everyone looked at him. The old man pointed at Ethan. When he was younger, I thought this one would be trouble. Ethan almost dropped his spoon. Grandfather. The old man laughed harder. But now, he smiled proudly. I think he'll become the most disciplined Ashbourne of them all. The table erupted into laughter. Only Ethan remained silent. Because he knew the truth. The credit didn't belong to him. It belonged to the tyrant living inside his head. Later that night, Ethan lay in bed. The room was quiet. For once, there were no tasks. No punishments. No demands. Just silence. After several minutes, he spoke softly. Are you still there? Yes, Dot. Ethan stared at the darkness. It was the shortest conversation they had ever had. Yet somehow, it felt less hostile than before. The little boy hesitated. Then asked the question that had been bothering him for months. Will you ever leave? For the first time. The voice remained silent for a very long time. Long enough for Ethan to think it wouldn't answer. Then, not until my job is done. Ethan didn't know why. But those words made him feel strangely uneasy. As though the voice wasn't talking about a task. As though it was talking about something much bigger. Something far in the future. Something neither of them could yet see. Chapter End. Chapter 4. The day he fought back. Ethan had finally reached his limit. For months, the voice had controlled his life. Wake up. Brush teeth. Exercise. Read. Sleep. Repeat. Every single day. No explanation. No negotiation. No freedom. At first, Ethan had been afraid. Then angry. Then exhausted. Now, he was determined. Determined to win. Just once. The opportunity arrived 3 days later. It was a beautiful morning. The sky was clear. Birds sang outside the window. And right on schedule. Wake up. Ethan smiled. A dangerous smile. Today was the day. He pulled the blanket over his head. Wake up. No. Task assigned. Leave bed within 60 seconds. No. The countdown immediately appeared. 60. 59. 58. Ethan crossed his arms. This time he wasn't backing down. Yesterday he had completed every task. The day before that too. Surely one failure wouldn't matter. The countdown continued. 25, 24, 23. His confidence remained strong. 10, 9. Maybe slightly less strong. 5, 4. The memory of previous punishments resurfaced. 3, 2. Sweat appeared on his forehead. 1. Ethan stayed in bed. The timer reached 0. Silence. Nothing happened. The room remained peaceful. No punishment. No voice. No consequences. Ethan blinked. Then grinned. I won. For the first time since the voice appeared. He had won. A laugh escaped him. Then another. Soon he was celebrating alone in his room. The tyrant had finally lost. Or so he thought. A new message appeared. Punishment delayed. Ethan froze. What? The next message appeared. Physical training session increased by 300% today. Ethan stared. The voice added one final line. Actions have consequences. For several seconds, complete silence filled the room. Then, that's not fair. 3 hours later, Ethan regretted every life decision he had ever made. The system had assigned run after run after run. By the time the punishment ended, his legs felt like jelly. Even Theodore noticed. The old man watched his grandson collapse into a chair. Ethan? The boy weakly raised his head. Yes, grandfather. Did you challenge a horse to a race? Ethan almost cried. No. Theodore laughed. Then why do you look half dead? Because an invisible tyrant had declared war on him. But Ethan couldn't exactly say that. That evening, he sat outside beneath the giant oak tree. For once, there were no tasks. No notifications. No punishments. Only silence. The cool breeze rustled the leaves above him. After several minutes, Ethan spoke. You cheated. No response. You absolutely cheated. Still nothing. The punishment wasn't even related. Silence. Ethan frowned. Then, the objective was not to punish. The boy blinked. That was unusual. The system had responded. What? The objective was to teach. Ethan stared at the words. Every choice has consequences. Good choices. Bad choices. Lazy choices. Disciplined choices. The consequence changes. The words vanished, leaving Ethan alone with his thoughts. For the first time, he didn't immediately argue. Because deep down, the voice wasn't wrong. That night, Theodore sat on the estate porch. Ethan sat beside him. Neither spoke for a while. They simply watched the stars. Eventually the old man smiled. You know, Ethan, The boy looked up. When I was young, I thought strength meant winning every fight. Ethan listened quietly. Theodore chuckled. But I learned something later. What? The old man's gaze remained fixed on the stars. The strongest people aren't the ones who never lose. They're the ones who keep moving after they lose. Ethan thought about the voice. About the fade rebellion. About the punishment. About getting back up anyway. For some reason, his grandfather's words felt strangely important. As though they would matter years from now. Decades from now. Maybe even longer. Before going to sleep, Ethan whispered into the darkness. Hey. Yes, Dot. The response came instantly. Ethan hesitated. Then quietly asked. Did you ever regret something? For the first time since the voice had appeared. There was a long pause. A very long pause. When the answer finally came, it was softer than usual. Almost human. Many things. The message disappeared immediately afterward. But Ethan remained awake long into the night. Because somehow, that answer felt sad. Chapter End. Chapter 5, The Successful Sons. Life in Oakridge was peaceful. Too peaceful. At least according to Ethan. The system made sure every day followed the same routine. Wake up. Exercise. Read. Learn. Sleep. Repeat. Months passed. The seasons changed. And little by little, Ethan adapted. He still disliked the system. But he no longer fought every task. Some battles simply weren't worth losing. Unfortunately, life had a way of introducing new problems. One morning, unusual excitement spread throughout the Ashbourne estate. Servants cleaned the guest rooms. Tables were arranged. Extra food was prepared. Even Theodore seemed unusually energetic. Ethan watched everything curiously. Finally, he found his mother. What's happening? She smiled. Your uncles are visiting. Ethan blinked. His uncles. Most of them lived far away. He rarely saw them. His mother fixed his collar. You'll meet your cousins too. Ethan nodded. At 4 years old, the idea sounded exciting. New people. New friends. New stories. He had no idea what was coming. The first carriage arrived shortly after noon. Then another. Then another. By sunset, the estate was full. The 4 elder Ashbourne brothers had returned. Each arrival attracted attention from the entire village. People whispered, pointed, admired. After all, these were Oakridge's greatest success stories. The eldest stepped from his carriage wearing expensive clothes. The second arrived surrounded by assistants. The third carried himself with the confidence of a man used to authority. The fourth seemed refined and sophisticated. Compared to them, Darren Ashbourne looked painfully ordinary. Ethan noticed it immediately. Every conversation somehow revolved around his successful uncles. Their promotions. Their businesses. Their achievements. Their children. Their houses. Their wealth. Nobody talked about Darren. Nobody asked about Darren. And if they did, it was usually out of politeness. For some reason, Ethan didn't like that. That evening, the entire family gathered for dinner. The dining hall buzzed with conversation. Theodore sat at the head of the table. The brothers sat nearby. Their wives chatted happily. Their children compared accomplishments. One cousin proudly announced he could already solve advanced mathematics. Another boasted about winning a regional competition. A third had earned admission into a prestigious academy. The adults praised them, complimented them, celebrated them. Meanwhile, Ethan quietly ate his food. Nobody asked what he could do. Not that he minded. He preferred eating in peace. Then one uncle suddenly laughed. Darren. His father looked up. Yes. The uncle smiled. Still living in Oakridge? The room grew quieter. Ethan frowned. Something about the tone felt wrong. His father smiled awkwardly. Someone has to maintain the estate. Of course. The uncle nodded. But haven't you ever considered something bigger? Another brother chuckled. That would require ambition. A few people laughed. Not loudly. Not cruelly. Just enough. Ethan's small hands tightened around his spoon. His father laughed too, as if it were a joke. But Ethan noticed something. His father's smile never reached his eyes. That night, Ethan sat outside alone. For the first time in weeks, he felt genuinely angry. Not because of the system. Not because of punishments. Not because of tasks. Because of what he had seen. The voice spoke unexpectedly. Why are you angry? Ethan blinked. This was unusual. The system rarely asked questions. They were making fun of father. Silence. They kept comparing him to everyone else. The breeze rustled through the trees. For a long moment, there was no response. Then, do you wish to help him? Ethan frowned. Of course. Then become capable. The words appeared one by one. Strength. Knowledge. Discipline. Competence. Acquire them. Results speak louder than complaints. The messages vanished, leaving Ethan alone beneath the stars. For a long time, he remained silent. Then he looked toward the estate. Toward the lights shining through the windows. Toward the family gathering inside. Toward his father. The man everyone overlooked. The man everyone compared. The man who smiled through every insult. For the first time, Ethan found a goal. Not a task. Not an order. Not a punishment. A goal. One day. Somehow. He would make sure nobody looked down on his father again. And somewhere deep inside his mind, the system remained silent. Because for the first time since its arrival, Ethan had chosen a path on his own. Chapter End.